Welcome back to this new episode of the Computational Antitrust podcast. My name is Thibault Schrepel. I am a faculty affiliate at Stanford University Codex Center, an associate professor of law at the VU Amsterdam, and the creator of the Computational Antitrust project, which explores how legal informatics can benefit antitrust law. The project brings together over 75 competition agencies and about 50 academics on the advisory boards. Every month or so, we publish an academic article on the subject of computational antitrust. You can find all of our publications in open access at computationalantitrust.com. My guest today is Kamil Nejezchleb, Vice Chairman of the Czech Competition Authority since April 2021. In today's conversation, Kamil and I explore how the Czech Competition Authority is integrating computational tools into its daily operations. We discuss major cases before the agency, the role that such tools have played in them, the internal structure and expertise required to support the shift toward computational antitrust, the legal constraints posed by Czech administrative and judicial review, and how the agency envisions the future of enforcement from algorithmic remedies to cross-border data collaboration. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. Kamil, thank you so very much for joining me on the podcast. We've known each other for quite some time now, so it's good to see you here, hopefully soon in person once again. My plan is that I've divided the conversation in three different parts. First, I want to talk about the present landscape at the Czech Competition Authority in terms of the tools you are using, the cases you have, to give a flavor to our listeners of what's happening in your country. Then I want to talk about liability. And then we will move towards the future of enforcement and whether you have any predictions or ideas as to what Czech competition law will be in a couple of years from now. But before we start, I want first to talk about you as a human being, not necessarily you as a competition expert. What is a main passion of yours outside of antitrust? And do you think that it may have an impact on your view of the world and or on your work, what you do within the agency, but it doesn't have to be. So please go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, Thibault, the pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you at this podcast. So I'm really happy for that. Regarding your first question and myself, actually, I do a lot of sports. I like sports to clean my brain, I would say. And I used to lift weights for some time. But recently, like last 2 years, I started with the martial arts and it gives me good stress relief exercise. My wife always makes jokes that it's a middle age crisis, but she prefers it to if I, for example, would buy a motorcycle. Of course, the other thing is a family and my two children with whom I like to spend my time. And last but not least, it's a skiing. I am a very big ski enthusiast and I love especially free riding outside of the groomed slopes, which also might be said that it's nice to think outside of the box and the regular stuff in my work and try to find new paths how to do stuff efficiently and also maybe with more fun. So that's like a short introduction of myself besides the work for the authority.
Yeah, nice. I recently watched a couple free riding skiing videos on YouTube. And now every time I enter YouTube, this is what YouTube will show me because the algorithm thinks, yeah, I'm obsessed. And I mean, I love it a lot, but probably not as much as you do. But yeah, and I can see indeed thinking outside the box, martial arts, it's one little step at the time, which I also will infer probably has some impact on your daily work and the care that you have to put into it. So yeah, I could see more of a complete picture of who you are now. So with that in mind, let's move on to the first part of the conversation, in which we talk about the present, right? So what you are doing, what is the agency doing, which tools you've been using, knowing that you've been contributing to our annual report. And I often quote your agency as being one that is very innovative. It seems that some of the computational tools that you are using are very unique. So we'll talk about that later on. But before that, I thought it would be nice for you to give a flavor of some of the major cases that you had within the agencies in the last 5 years and to discuss how important computational antitrust has been in those cases, if it has been. And please feel free by all means to say that computational antitrust was not at all part of the picture if this is the case.
Okay, regarding the last 5 years, I would say there are two groups of the main cases. First is the cases regarding the bid rigging. I think that our authority dealt with quite a lot of cases regarding the public procurement, and we actually used the advantage that our authority is also the authority that has the power to perform a surveillance regarding public procuring from the perspective of public procurement. So we have quite nice possibility to get the data and information from the other division, which is led by the other vice chair. The other thing is that we put a bid rigging as our priority. We cooperate with the police, we cooperate with the public procurement agencies, so we are able to detect the cases. Regarding computational antitrust, we try to monitor the data. We have some tools. We also developed one. It's quite some time. It's even longer than 5 years. But the main problem is not the tools themselves, but the data, the quality of the data. Because I would like to maybe recall one particular case. It was bid rigging, alleged bid rigging in the public procurement for some supplies of gravel. And the tool gave us some red flags that these are some irregularities. So we managed to go for the on rate. And later on, we found out that the irregularity was caused because the bidders actually filled the data, I would say, in a lousy way. And the procuring was for different fractions of gravel. So this caused the irregularities, and it was not a bid rigging. And I think the data are one of the biggest concerns, the quality of data. The second group of cases, and our authority is quite well known for it, are retail price maintenance. And actually, we started several cases in the pet food sector and also electric appliances sector. And we found separate resale price maintenance practices among different brands, different producers, which actually compete also horizontally. So we, for example, in the pet food sector, we think we actually found and find 5 cases already, and we have other 3 ongoing. So the whole sector was actually hit by those agreements. And we use some data scraping, and we always, when we prepare, for example, the on rate or generally monitoring the market, we use some data analysis, and we use the tools to get the data from, for example, price comparison websites. And based on that, we build our suspicion. And last but not least, there is an ongoing case regarding a platform for job advertising. And it's a heavy data case, and it's alleged abuse of dominance, where we see that our main server for job advertising called jobs.cz might be a closed ecosystem. And we actually now are in the middle of the dealing with remedies. There is a market testing ongoing, so I can speak about it publicly because the market questions are public. And we try to, let's say, penetrate the system and to enable competition to emerge. And in this case, we actually have a lot of data analysis. So that's probably it to summarize what's happening right now. And of course, we are trying to always use new tools and adapt it in our general work, but I think maybe we will be talking about it a bit later.
Thank you very much for the overview. So it seems that if data is the issue, and indeed often we see that it is, because the design of the tool is one thing, but then you need the data, the expertise, and we'll talk about that. But then what are the computational tools that you are currently using the most, meaning the ones where you feel that you have the data and you are comfortable with the outcome and what they give you?
Actually, I think the most we used what I already mentioned, the tools to get the data regarding the prices in the vertical cases, and to actually monitor or test the variability of prices. And if we see that the variability is very low, then we try to investigate the case and put this into the file as a source of one of the sources of our suspicion to be able to survive the legal review of the legality of inspections. Also, we continuously try to cooperate with our legislators and try to convince them to be more strict with regards to the data production in the public procurement area, to be able, let's say, to use much more efficiently our let's say tools for bid rigging detection. Also, if it's the part of the question, we use the NOIX for inspections as a specialized software. And we have some experience with Celebrite, but due to some budgetary restrictions, we stayed nowadays only with NUX. And also in our practice, we do the on-site inspections. And for example, to go through the cell phones on-site with this specialized software actually appears to be too time consuming, and it's more efficient to do it like without these tools. But maybe we will come back to some specialized tool because we are now in the middle of the process to, let's say, move the inspections from on-site to our premises and to finish the big data analysis here, which actually also will provide the opportunity to maybe think about other computational tools for this exercise.
You know, what's quite interesting is that I've heard many competition agencies telling me that because of restrictions on the budget, they increased their reliance on computational tools because you can scale them. But it seems that it may also play the other way around, where you would like to use some tools, but you need to train yourself and you may have costs involved in running the tool, which may mean that you will need to abandon the tool. Now, if my numbers are correct, you have about 250 employees at the agency, and please correct me if I'm wrong. My question is, how many technical experts do you have? Do you have more today than 2 years ago, given those restrictions on the budget? And do they work as a separate unit, or are they working within existing legal teams?
Okay, sure. Your number is correct, but it's the whole competition authority. And our authority has, as I mentioned, other responsibilities: quick procurement surveillance, state aid, access to the railroad infrastructure, superior bargaining power in agricultural sector. And my division, which is competition division, is solely responsible for competition issues, has 6 to 8 people. So regarding the competition, it's 68 people. And from these 68, now we have three technical experts. One is a guy who is specialized in IT, and 2 are data analysts and mathematicians. This year, actually, we founded new chief economist separate division, which also one of the tasks of this division is also to develop the use of IT and technical tools. They are, for example, one of their tasks is to find ways how to more efficiently use the large language models or AI. And those are guys who are good with numbers and techniques. So this is the situation. I would say it's better than it used to be because we managed to find some experts, especially from universities. We have a very good experience to hire from universities, and so actually to enable university specialists to work with us part-time. It's very good to have them as a regular employees because now then we are able to give them also sensitive data. They are under contract, but they are not willing to become full employees, but they are more than happy to participate, and especially when we allow them, for example, to publish the results in the articles, of course, aggregated numbers and general findings. But this cooperation with budgetary restrictions seems to be the way how we can go forward, even at those professions where the private sector is much, much better paid than the state sector.
So regarding your relationship with the outside world, right, outside of the agency, you just mentioned cooperation with academics or technical experts that you employ, so they then move within the agency in a sense, or at least part-time. Are you relying on computational tools provided by third parties, such as companies that are not at all part of the agency, or is it like a sensible subject, and would you rather develop everything from within?
So far, it's under discussions, and actually nowadays we use like the third parties, technical tools and computational tools, maybe or almost exclusively, to be honest, for the intelligence gathering and some capacity building, and also to help us with like a normal task, also to help us with general propagation of competition to create nice presentations, videos, etc. We are, let's say, in the middle of negotiations, how to solve this issue, and if we are willing to move further step towards the more use of computational tools, which probably regarding our budgetary possibilities will be just under the contract to be able to cooperate with some provider of the big large language models and to be able to put there our sensitive data. With regards to the people outside of the authority which are working with us outside, it's the same. They, for example, it's nice if some university has bought some databases and they can use the data for the analysis also working for our authority. That's also, I think, very nice synergy.
Yeah. So that raises, of course, the question of liability, right? So who's liable in case the tool provided to you is wrong, or in case that technical expert is wrong or not as accurate as you may want her or him to be, which then leads us to part 2 of our conversation about the accountability within the agency. The first question that I have is this. When an AI system, and you mentioned that you have now someone who's dedicated to see how LLMs and foundation models can be used within the agency, when such a system produces probabilistic harm or computational evidence, how do you foresee the agency complying with your act on administrative procedure? Is that you have to be able to provide evidence where no reasonable doubt remains. So again, coming back to my question, when you have such computational evidence, is Czech administrative law a constraint on you? Are you considering that, or are you not there in a situation where you have to rely exclusively on computational evidence?
Actually, I think that the possibility to rely on computational evidence exclusively is far away. Regarding, I think the Czech courts are relatively rigid and maybe old-schooled, and to be able to prove some decision, we need like hard evidence. Where I see the biggest potential regarding the computational evidence is, and we do this at the preliminary stages of investigations, gathering the information, building the suspicion. And actually, if I want to go step by step, so the first step that I would like to achieve and to survive under the court scrutiny is to be able to build the reasonable suspicion that would allow me to go for the inspection solely on this score. And I think this is like the highest bar so far achievable, because my understanding is if it AI, based on this, I would simplify black box, where if you gave there some input, the output is slightly different all the time. This is something I don't believe that the courts would be willing to accept. But on the other hand, like the algorithm, where the input generates always the same output, that I think might be, if proven and explained in a clear, comprehensible language to the judges, this type of evidence, I think, might survive under our current administrative law system. And generally, on the other hand, our administrative access, literally everything might be used as an evidence. So not itself, but we can definitely use also AI-generated maybe scores or views as a supporting evidence. But I don't think it would be possible to sustain like the standard of proof necessary for competition law infringement solely based on a computational programs, or especially just AI, where this, and again, I use the word black boxes, work.
Yeah, and you do see that when you use ChatGPT or some of them, that indeed the temperature, as they call it, is quite high. I think by default it's 0.7%, which means that 70% of the time for the same inputs, a different output will actually be produced.
Yes.
Which is extremely problematic if you then go before the judge and recompute all the evidence you have, and then you have to present the judge with new evidence and not the one that you had in the decision that you issued. But do I understand correctly that when you want to go for a down rate, you need first to go before the court and ask for the permission? You cannot just do that on your own.
Actually, in our system, we issue the warrant for down rate by our authority, which is signed by the chairman regularly. But almost every single down rate is then immediately challenged by the inspected party at the courts. And the courts develop, and it's a legal term in the Czech Republic, reasonable suspicion.
Yeah.
And I think to build this suspicion based in the, I would say, most futuristic view solely on, let's say, computational tools might be achievable. Because it's still not that we would say you infringe the law. It's just we have this huge amount of data we put into the reasonably generated prompt, and the AI said, or in maybe better, several AI models said, this is very probable that this or that might be caused because of the cartel agreement. Of course, I would always try to support it with other pieces of evidence, but I think this is currently the bar of what is possible to achieve with the use of computational antitrust in our legal system. So to build a reasonable suspicion that will survive this court review that we went for legally.
Yeah. And of course, the more you want to support that with other type of evidence, the longer time it would take. Now, let me ask a final question regarding this subject of accountability. You've mentioned the fact that judges, for the most part, may be a bit old-fashioned, and maybe for good reasons why, so it's not a critique, but that they may be skeptic toward this kind of evidence. Are you engaged in any sort of training, or do you have relationship with the courts? Are you trying to push for the courts to accept AI and your work that you've been doing in the recent years in a more effective way?
Okay, actually, our advantage is that only 2 courts are actually the courts that where our decisions are reviewed, because it's based on the location of the authority. So it's a regional administrative court in Brno, and then if its decision is appealed, it's the cassation court also in Brno. So it's relatively a small amount of judges. We have, I would say, really good relationship, much better than in many European countries, at least as I understand what my colleagues, for example, during the ECN meetings say. But on the other hand, we are not far enough to actually talk with them regarding the use of computational antitrust. We are now maybe more in a discussions regarding general economic evidence. For example, recently we had a very nice workshop regarding down rates, and the view to what extent like the economic performance of this or that market might be enough for us to go for down rate. Still, the bar, according to me, and of course I'm the competition enforcer, so I'm a bit biased because I see cartels everywhere, but it's too low. It's too high, sorry. It's too high. And I think we should be enabled to be more suspicious than actual case law says. So I think regarding the relationship, there will be the opportunity to speak with them. They are very open, and I would like to praise them for this. It's really good. But regarding the real, let's say, state of play, we are a step behind this. But I think when there is a case, we will strongly try to support the possibility of use new tools, because it's the future, definitely.
All right, so let's imagine that indeed the court give you more freedom in terms of you going for down rate, collecting evidence, and then you find a way, whether it's by computational evidence exclusively or complemented by other type of evidence, to show that there is a practice and it's beyond reasonable doubt. So then you impose a remedy on the company. And that leads me to part 3 of our conversation on the future of competition law in your country. How would you feel about mandating a code level fix within the software of a company, something that would execute automatically, something you could just deploy from the agency inside of the company? Would it be problematic when it comes to due process in Czech law, or is it something you will envision one day might be feasible?
Okay, probably in the same vein. I think definitely problematic, but not impossible. I think, and I would be, to be honest, still quite reluctant to impose this as a remedy. But on the other hand, if offered as a commitment by the company itself, there I would be probably willing to accept if regarding the all specific case should deal with the alleged competition problem we see. I would be willing to accept these let's say automatic fix within the code of the company. Again, and in the same way as we mentioned with this black box, I would very much prefer or demand it, let's say, algorithm-based fix, not just the AI LLM-based fix, because as we talked, for the one input, the output is probably generally same, but still all the time a bit different. This, I think, also might be legally possible. And regarding, for example, data platforms, I think it's also and will be probably the best way how to be able to monitor and effectively enforce the commitments and also the remedies. Because, for example, at that case I mentioned regarding our server for job advertising, we actually demand them to open their system by changing the code. It's not the same like automatic fixation, but still, I can imagine, for example, if they offered us, okay, we put there some code that would inform you regarding the breaches or regarding, for example, when the database would stop somebody to for example, get in, that might work, I think. And again, legally, if it's certain, replicable, and possible to explain for eventual judicial review, why shouldn't it work?
Yeah. So those are the criteria more than having a human in the loop, right? Humans are in the loop, but if I understand, you are saying that if you can replicate and you can really understand what the code is doing and achieving, then why not? Especially if the company comes to you and all that.
Exactly, and perceive it in precisely the way you said. The human is always in the loop because not for the execution of this, but for example, to deciding, okay, we are imposing this remedy or we are accepting this commitment. This would be signed by me or Mr. Chairman. So then still the human being is involved and then it's up to the software.
Yeah. Although, as you said, it may be to sign it, but one prediction I can make is that the more it will go, the more the case handlers and eventually you at the very top of the agency will actually rely on what software may tell you might be a suitable remedy, right? So it's not necessarily that the humans will be doing everything from A to Z and then code would just execute that. It may also be that in the design of the remedy, code and computational antitrust will play a role. Now, if we just take a step back, so we talked about monitoring a company and the way they embed or apply your remedy. What about cooperating with other competition agencies and naturally have in mind other agencies in East Europe? Because it seems, at least from the outside, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that you have a coherent way of seeing competition law, which is not always what we see in Brussels. So I would imagine that you and other agencies in the region could cooperate toward sharing anonymized, pulling data, open source, sharing tools that you may have. Is that something that you are doing, that you are considering, or do you think that for any other reasons this might not see the light?
Actually, I think it's also the future. It's a necessity to cooperate. And of course, distance plays a role, and cultural and also economic situation in the countries that are, for example, in Central or Eastern Europe are, of course, closer than with the big countries like Germany and France. That's obvious. And we try to cooperate even now. We think, for example, about the possibility to develop some tools together and use them. For example, there I see great potential during those days is maybe to cooperate with regard to sectoral inquiries. For example, to develop the same methodology to gather the data for different countries, use the same methods, and then compare the results and talk about these methods. And also, it's not just the case of the Czech Republic, we have the problem with the budget. So to share data, to share experts, because if the specialist have the data, have the numbers, he is or she is able to work with them. For example, recently we had a meeting and spoke about the possibility to help with the IT experts during the dawn raids. We really see that the future from the practical reasons. And regarding the legality, with regards to public data, I don't see there any problem. And also, I think we have the great advantage of Regulation 1 2003. And when we are dealing with anything which might have the effect on trade criterion, then we are able to basically share anything and use it as an evidence. And in this regard, we also not even within the Central and Eastern Europe have a very nice cooperation with the ECN. And we share experiences. And for example, I think, I'm not sure which authority exactly, but one of the northern countries, they work very efficiently and successfully with, for example, Microsoft Copilot, which is something about what we are thinking now. But for that, we would need to technically move to the cloud, like our systems more. And there are some limits of my understanding, but my IT guys told me this. Yes, we try to share the positive experiences in this regard.
Would you foresee that in a couple of years, you would cooperate regarding those technical issues more with the Central and Eastern Europe agencies? Or would you say that because of the 2003, this will actually be pretty global, or at least European?
Honestly, I still think that it will be much more in the Central and Eastern Europe because of, for example, different school and different budgets. Because, for example, even now I know that the bigger authorities, they are able to buy tools which we are not able to buy. And it's not a problem of sharing, it's a problem of licensing, and they just couldn't provide us with those tools. And also, and again, it's back to what I said at the beginning of this question, our markets is much more similar, and the problems on those markets is much more similar. It probably inherently will tend to, let's say, more or deeper cooperation among the similar authorities, similar size, similar staff, similar budget. That's my prediction, but nevertheless, I very much like to hear from all the corners of Europe what they do, because it's a great source of inspiration and information.
Okay, let's put some concrete objectives on the table, and this will be my very last question. If we reconvene in, let's say, 5 years from now, what would success look like for computational antitrust in Czechia? And I guess it's a way of asking, which indicators can we talk about today that we can then use to measure whether or not computational antitrust and, generally speaking, the quality of enforcement has improved in 5 years from now?
Okay, first, I think the general acceptance of those tools by not only managers and high-level staff, but from every single case handler at my authority. It will be completely normal that all the people are comfortable and skilled to use those tools. To use those tools for better detection, more efficient going through the evidence and gathering the evidence, to be able to work very efficiently with large language models. 5 years is quite a time, and I would love to have our own specially trained large language model, trained on the specifically Czech data, Czech cases, our not only cases, but also complaints we rejected, but generally our own language model that would help us in our everyday work. So this is what I would love to see. And of course, to be able to measure how the investigators use the tools, it's not so difficult. I can check within my team and look who used this or not. Also, I would like to be able to understand which tools the the companies the private sector use and how they use it. For example, and it's even nowadays, I can see there are much more companies which base their business model on the recommending how to price of the products. And basically they say, okay, tell us what's your product and we can do the analysis and recommend you the price. And even now I see some potential issues, and I think we will see dynamic pricing and pricing based on AI decisions. It will be a norm, I think, and we need to adapt ourselves to this. Also, I would like to see that we will be a bit further with the judges. So the evidence produced by those tools will be used. And as I already mentioned, for example, as the basis for the down rates. So willingly, and maybe even as an evidence in the general, in the main procedure, not only for down rates. And last but not least, the cooperation among the authorities will be even higher, and we will be capable to efficiently share the data. And the last, and it's a really wish, not only for antitrust, but generally for the Czech Republic, to be able as a state more efficiently, much more efficiently share and work with data. Because nowadays we still have laws that are a drawback to share data within the state, and it's really, really bad because it doesn't make any sense. We have the power to legally ask for some data. There is the other state body who has the data, but it's not legally possible for us to ask the other state body to give us the data. We need to ask the companies again, which produces so much more drawback and so much more costs. It doesn't make sense. So I think as a state, we need to work on this generally, not even in the antitrust fields.
Yeah, very nice. It's a curious way indeed, where it may be easier for you to access data outside of the country if in the hand of another competition agency than it is to access the data coming out of another administrative agency within the Czech Republic.
Yeah, and it's purely based on a not very well drafted, if I put it politely, law. We managed to actually, let's say, make the situation better. We managed to put our authority among the list of the authorities to the other laws, for example, to our Telecommunication Act, and they can share with us basically all the data, but still with some other institutions, for example, Czech National Bank, there are still drawbacks, which doesn't make sense. And also the state doesn't have any centralized database where it would pull the data, use the data. And if I imagine that the most successful companies are successful because they can work with the data efficiently, why the state shouldn't? And the same probably is true also for the cooperation among the competition authorities, for example, in Europe. We have the Regulation 1, as was said, so why not to share the data more massively and cooperate more efficiently? It's the moment.
And of course, we understand that there is a need for business secrets and the right of defense. It doesn't mean that you cannot draft a law that will enable you to access that data, showing that indeed it's beyond reasonable doubt or all the reasons that we've discussed. But that will make it possible for you to access the data if necessary. I doubt this will be something you will have in a couple of years from now, because that's not a way to run an economy and to regulate the economy, but we'll see about that. What's very nice is that we end on a very interesting note, and that's something we often come back to in this podcast, where we see the interplay between the use of those tools, the data you need to run those tools, and actually the substance of the law, right? And the need to change the regulations and adapt them. So on that, thank you so very much. It was a very pleasant discussion and I've learned a lot. I hope people out there will also learn a thing or two. I hope to see you in person very soon, whether in Czechia or Amsterdam or Paris or who knows, elsewhere in the world. To you and to everyone out there, take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else too. Bye-bye.
Okay, Thibault, thank you. It was a really pleasure to speak with you, and I'm happy that I could contribute to this podcast, and I hope it will help us to build more reliance on the computational antitrust and to be more efficient as enforcers in the job we are trying to do.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye, Thibault.